Welcome to the show, Thomas Sowell, the leading economist in the United States and one of the great thinkers of the modern American scene. He has a brand new book out. It's called Discrimination and Disparities. I had the pleasure of reading it over the last couple of weeks. I've actually referenced it at least twice on the show since I read it. I think it's quite brilliant. Professor Sowell, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start with what I think is the most important part of the book. You make an argument with regard to the definition of discrimination, because people tend to lump all sorts of discrimination together. You talk about discrimination 1, 1B, and discrimination 2. Can you just explain what those are and what the difference is between them?
Yes, discrimination 1 is used in the sense of people who have discriminating tastes, meaning that they are very good at comparing things and making decisions accordingly. Discrimination 2 means almost the opposite, namely that once you've identified someone's identity, then that person's individual qualities don't matter. You will treat them negatively on the basis of that. And it's discrimination, too, that anti-discrimination laws have been passed to deal with.
And discrimination 1B is a different type of discrimination that you discuss as well. This would be the use of group data in order to make individual decisions in the absence of individual information. Is that right?
That's right. In other words, discrimination 1A would be judging each person as an individual. 1B would be judging individuals by the group that they come from, in the absence of a high cost of information that would have a prohibitive cost.
And the reason that distinction is so important, and you talk about it in the book, is because what people tend to do is lump all of these things together. So if you, for example, are a taxi driver in New York City and there's a higher crime rate in the black community, and so you don't pick up a particular black customer, people accuse you of being a racist, as opposed to simply you're using the information available to you. And the proper solution to that would be the Uber or Lyft solution, where you can actually profile the criminal backgrounds of potential customers, presumably.
Yes, and in fact, black taxi drivers do that just as white taxi drivers do.
So, Professor Sowell, one of the things that's great about the book, and I think the most important thing, is that you point out that just because there are disparities between racial groups, which is, of course, the most important thing people talk about in the country, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's some sort of vicious discrimination going on. There could be an informational-based discrimination 1B going on. There could be a behavioral discrimination type 1 going on. How is it that we should approach separating out the types of discrimination that are really insidious from the other types of discrimination when we just see a headline in the newspaper that says black folks have fewer homes than white folks, or black folks are committing more crimes than white folks, for example?
Well, I think that the crucial implicit assumption is that in the absence of discrimination and in the absence of any genetic differences, that people would be more or less randomly or equally spread out, and therefore there wouldn't be these differences. In point of fact, there are innumerable differences. One of the simplest ones that gets ignored all the time is that groups have different ages. That is, the Japanese Americans have a median age that is 20 years older than the median age of Mexican Americans. And so if you're talking about jobs that require, either long years of education or 10 years of experience or something like that, then just the demographic differences means you have no chance from the outset, even if Japanese Americans and Mexican Americans were absolutely identical in every other aspect.
And one of the things that this makes clear, your discussion of this discrimination, your book, Discrimination and Disparities, and the differences between groups, one of the things that this makes clear is that virtually all government programs that are directed at direct redistribution between groups are probably bound to fail because they're not taking into account the real reasons for the disparities in the first place.
That's very true.
So the book is Discrimination and Disparities. Professor Sowell obviously has written a number of books. I've recommended probably 10 to 15 of his books on the program already. His latest is really timely and really effective. Professor Sowell, one final question for you, because I know that we're a little short on time. There was a New York Times study that came out a couple of weeks ago, and the claim from the New York Times is that it showed that black boys particularly are facing discrimination in the United States, that black girls are not, and that among rich households, even household income is not a good predictor of future performance. The suggestion from the New York Times is that America is just more racist against black boys than black girls. What was your take on that study if you had a chance to look at it?
I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I see no reason whatever that one should expect boys and girls to behave the same any more than we would expect, Japanese Americans to be highly represented in baseball when their median age is in the upper 40s.
Again, the book is Discrimination and Disparities. Professor Sowell, thanks so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to have you. It's always an honor, and we always appreciate that you take the time to be on the program.
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much.